this guide will show you how to remove and replace your oxygen sensors. We will identify which is which, and share tips and tricks on making this the easiest process possible. People typically replace their oxygen sensors as a last resort, before the true last resort of replacing catalytic converters, to deal with check engine lights for exhaust efficiency. Let's cut the intro here and get started. You'll need uninhibited access to the left side of the engine bay. Remove the engine bay covers. If you need help, see my engine cover video on my channel and linked in the description under chapters. Disconnect oxygen sensors. Let's remove the oxygen sensor connectors from their housing and then disconnect oxygen sensors. To begin, snip any zip ties holding excess oxygen sensor wiring in place. For the removal from the housing part, for each catalytic converter, there's an upstream connector and a downstream connector. In other words, a sensor before the catalytic converter and after. The upstream and downstream sensors have different shaped connectors, so it's impossible to mix up upstream and downstream. Mixing them up between banks and where they go is a different story. Mine were different colors between the exhaust pipes. My bank 1 connectors were black and bank 2 were brown. Just to be safe, label them if you feel like you'll forget. Now for the removal part. Most importantly, if your oxygen sensor connectors are stuck, don't pry them out with a screwdriver, as we can see someone has already tried and done before. Use the trick, instead, that we learned from Ruslan's other video with shift cables, and grab them using pliers, and wiggle them out little by little. Just take one of these, get a good hold, wiggle it out. Oh man, that is already tough, even from a little bit. And it pops right out. It's much simpler and easier this way, and there's much less danger to the other components. Now, let's get to the disconnecting portion. On the larger, squarer connections, press out on the tab towards the back of the connector, so that the tab presses back away. Ow. You might want to wear gloves because that hurt. On the right hand side, goes on like this. Put your fingernail on this, on the square thing here. Push down with your fingernail and pull it out. It'll only go back in one way. So the other ones too, like so. Push down with your thumb, pull, and pop right out. And that's how you disconnect your oxygen sensors. The heat shield has a bracket attached to it, and the whole thing is held in by force via clips at the top. First, remove the bracket via the 2 triple square bolts at the bottom, and a bolt that should not be missing at the top. Then, applying leverage against the other components, being careful not to damage anything, pull out one side of the heat shield and then the other, little by little. There we go. Pulls out. I'm using from the front, I just got leverage here, making sure not to cut myself against stuff, and then it slides out. Left hand recommended glove, because it's scratched against something, but not too bad. Also getting leverage so that when it does break loose, I don't cut myself. There we go. I used an oxygen sensor removal tool that slides onto each sensor and lets you break it loose. Also, perfectly acceptable is a bent wrench with an open end, and many people DIY making this wrench. Once they break loose, the oxygen sensors are easy to twist out by hand. Broke it loose. That was the setup to get it broken loose. I wrote U1 and D1 to represent upstream bank 1 and downstream bank 1 with a marker, and did the same for labeling the bank 2 sensors. Be sure to cover up the holes. Be sure it's enough material not to fall inside the catalytic converter when you're covering them up. At this point, we rely on our labels for the oxygen sensors to reinstall them in the correct locations. Since we're using a tool to remove the oxygen sensors and reinstall them, we approximate the torque. That's between 30 and 37 foot-pounds using the wrench so that they're snug without stripping. With the oxygen sensors reinstalled but their wires still dangling, let's reinstall the heat shield. It's good that the wires are still dangling because we'll be able to get them out of the way. Aligning the heat shield perfectly takes a little bit of trial and error. First, we loosely insert it over everything and push the clips back into place, roughly where they were, and then we might have to pull it out and adjust it left and right so that with the bracket installed, the top bolt lines up with the bolt on the engine. This took me a few tries because the bracket should be uninstalled when you're placing the heat shield. When everything is in place, we tighten the bolts, attaching the bracket to the heat shield, and also replace the top bolt with one of our extras from the exhaust. Reconnecting the oxygen sensor electrical connectors is infinitely easier than removing them, so make sure all 4 are connected, assuming you've labeled them correctly, reinsert them, and don't forget to zip tie the extra wires so that they stay out of the way. Let's reinstall the engine covers so that it's a complete installation. If everything goes according to plan, once we clear all engine codes, they never come back for the exhaust, and we can enjoy passing emissions or just an annoying check engine light finally going away.